Hey, what's up guys, it's Renaldo here. So this video is going to focus on Dr. Piet Croucamp, who was one of the 44 Afrikaners that signed that letter that was penned to Donald Trump, in which they state that they don't need America's help and they don't want Afrikaners to be involved in the cultural war of the United States. Now, you can go and read this letter. It's readily available. If you just Google Afrikaner letter to Trump, you'll find it. But what I find interesting is that there are a lot of names of the signatories that are actual people that hate Afrikaners. And they have made this very clear by the interviews that they've had over the years, statements that they've made, social media posts that they've put out. And of course, this is exactly what mainstream media wanted. They wanted this narrative by people that are Afrikaners, but they don't identify at all as Afrikaners. You know, they were born as an Afrikaner into an Afrikaans household, a white Afrikaner family. So they are Afrikaners in name only. They don't believe in the culture, they don't value the culture, and they pretty much despise being Afrikaners. Now, if we just look at three of them, we can look at Max de Pre, we can look at Pierre de Vos. Yeah, a lot of questions about Pierre de Vos, by the way. And then we've got Piet Croucamp, who has on multiple occasions come out and stated that he despises Afrikanerdom and he doesn't associate with that. But the question I have is, why then did he sign as an Afrikaner when he clearly does not believe that he is an Afrikaner? Now, why do I say this? Well, we can just use an article in which he clearly discusses his beliefs of Afrikaners, and this was from 2012. Have a look at the following. So, like I said, this article is from 2012. It was a response from F.W. de Klerk to what Piet Croucamp had to say. Magically, this article isn't available on Polity anymore. It has now been removed, and I assume it's because he realized that people started using this against him. But here, in his own words, Dr. Croucamp had the following to say. He facilitated the conversation and expressed himself as follows in the quoted article. My political instinct has an aversion to Afrikaner politics, and I made it clear from the outset that the term Afrikaner is ideologically charged. I think people who describe themselves as Afrikaners do not feel themselves as part of South Africa, and their objectives do not correspond with the constitution of the country. As far as I'm concerned, Afrikaners are virtually by definition, with rare exceptions, intolerant and probably also racists. I'm convinced that being Afrikaans is as obsolete as a smoke signal, and that South Africa would be better served without Afrikaners, just as the country would be better off without Julius Malema. Alright, so please explain to me a couple of things. The first thing I would like to know is, how can you stereotype an entire culture like that? Just because your mom and dad might have been racist and they hung around friends that were racist when you were young and when you were growing up, doesn't mean that every single Afrikaner out there were like your parents. You know, let me just go and say that right off the bat. So just because you had racist parents or racist friends that are Afrikaners or Afrikaans doesn't mean that every Afrikaner is a racist. You signed this letter as an Afrikaner, but yet you don't identify as an Afrikaner. So how does that work? How can you sign a letter as an Afrikaner representing Afrikaners, but you just said all those terrible things about Afrikaners? That is what I don't really understand. And then, of course, mainstream media jumped on that because, hey, there were a bunch of academics and religious individuals that signed this letter. But if you dive deeper, you'll find that most of those individuals that signed that letter are leftists and they are academics, and, you know, they just don't really understand the core of what Afrikanerdom is. If you actually just go and look at the name itself, and the way that Piet Croucamp described it is that they don't see themselves as part of South Africa. Why then would they call themselves Afrikaners? Because that translated to English is Africans. If you don't see yourself as an African, then how is it possible that you call yourself Afrikaners, which is, like I said, the direct translation is African in English? But once again, this is the narrative that's being driven by the leftist Afrikaners. I mean, they are only Afrikaners in name. They aren't actually Afrikaners. But besides that is the fact that mainstream media jumps on this, whenever they have an opportunity to talk badly about Afrikaans or about Afrikaners, because that is the thing that still generates revenue for mainstream media. That is what gets the clicks, because the overwhelming majority of South Africa are black. We know that. And the ANC, MK, and the EFF has driven this narrative that Afrikaners and apartheid is to blame for everything that's wrong in South Africa. And therefore, whenever they speak negatively about Afrikaners, then people will click and they will read what was being said. But here's a question that I've got to News 24 specifically. You decided to give space and airtime to this letter when only 44 Afrikaners signed it. And you dedicated 2 specific articles to it. The one in which you posted the letter, and then a follow-up in which you used some of the quotes by people that penned that letter. Now, I have reached out to you on 2 occasions where I have told you that I have 5,000 signatories to a letter that opposes what these 44 Afrikaners said, and of course I have not received any feedback. So News 24 will gladly publish a letter and talk about it when it is in a negative connotation to Afrikaners. And yet when I have an opposing letter that has been signed by 100 times the amount of people that signed the letter that they published, then they just give no feedback, and they're not interested in that article, because that article won't give them clicks and it won't portray Afrikaners in a positive light. Now, if you don't believe me, this is how many signatures we got so far. That's right, 5,790 signatures, as you can see there. And it's just the complete opposite of what the other letter. You can go and check it out. I'll put a link in the description if you want to go and sign this petition, this letter. But as you can see, 5,790 signatures. And I believe this is 3 days since I've launched this campaign. And obviously, I haven't promoted it like crazy. I've just posted it once on YouTube, and I mentioned it once in a video, and that's how many signatures it got. So this just clearly, once again, exposes the double standards when it comes to journalism in South Africa. And News 24 has consistently said that they don't have a bias, they report on the news, but yet here we are. They will gladly post a letter by 44 Afrikaners, and I've got more than 100 times that amount, and they are completely ignoring writing a letter on it. And the question is why? Why do they not want to report on this petition and this letter? It's because it goes against their narrative. Because for so many years, white people, and specifically Afrikaners, have been indoctrinated to be these humble individuals and feel bad for what their forefathers did. As if Afrikaners is the only they're the only ones that have forefathers that have committed atrocities, right? Not the British. Oh no, the British never did anything. Oh, and the Zulus, Shaka Zulu, Mfakane, million people brutally killed over the years. Nothing? No. Okay, so only Afrikaners. Okay. So it goes against the narrative. And if you talk positively about an Afrikaner or a white person, it doesn't flow with mainstream media. And that is what I want to tell every single white person and every single Afrikaner out there. Stop feeling guilty for something that you had no control over. And stop allowing mainstream media and social media comments to attack you and belittle you and insult you. You had nothing to do with apartheid. You had nothing to do with colonialism. And you were born into a skin that you didn't choose. You were born into a culture that you didn't choose. There is nothing to be ashamed about. So stop allowing mainstream media to drive a narrative like this. And that is why I'm so vocal about this letter. I've mentioned it a couple of times because it annoys me. Because every time an Afrikaner starts feeling proud about being an Afrikaner, then you will get a negative article, or you'll get people that will say these terrible things. Because in South Africa, you can have a black business forum, you can have a black lawyers association, you can have so many black-only entities, and nobody bats an eyelid. But the moment a white person, and specifically an Afrikaner in this country, feels proud about their heritage, or they're proud of being an Afrikaner, then you are automatically a racist, or you're this negative thing. No, it's time for us to stop being apologetic on something we had no control over, and it's time to be proud of who and what you are and what your forefathers accomplished. I mean, the Afrikaner did so much, and the only thing that mainstream media and the government and the social media commentators want to focus on is the negative. Everybody will mention the negatives about apartheid and the negatives of the Afrikaner, but nobody will mention the infrastructure that was built. Nobody will mention all the good things that was done, because hey, we are a country that only focuses on the negative, but only applicable to white people. So Piet Croucamp and Max de Pree and Pierre de Vos and everybody that signed that letter, just shove it where the sun doesn't shine. So to conclude this video, I just want to say that every culture has got blemishes in their history and some bad actors and bad apples. It's not only Afrikaners. And yet, mainstream media and South Africa as a whole expect us to consistently stay on our knees when the overwhelming majority of Afrikaners that are working in South Africa today and contributing towards society had no hand in apartheid. But yet, we are the ones that consistently have to carry the cross, and we are the ones that have 143 race-based laws that discriminate against us in 2025. Enough is enough. Start being proud of your culture, and start just not feeling embarrassed for being white or having to apologize for the sins of your father or your grandfather. Stop allowing mainstream media to make you feel bad for being white or being Afrikaans, and speak up. It's because most people don't say anything and allow mainstream media to drive this narrative that we are in this position where we are the punching bag of South Africa. Enough is enough. Stand up and be proud of who and what you are. Genoeg is genoeg. And that's pretty much all I got to say. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, share this video far and wide. And if you like my channel and you'd like to support this channel, then you can become a member. You can do so by clicking the join button below. And that's all I got to say. Till later, cheers and peace out.
You don't even know me, but every time you see me, you say, I wear my massacre. You don't even know me, but every time you see me, you say, I wear my massacre. I wear my massacre. You don't even know me, but every time you see me, you say, I wear my massacre. I wear my massacre.